Chloe, let's not kid ourselves here. Passengers want to feel safe when they see who's in charge, and a woman in that role? It's not exactly comforting, is it? Dave's words hit like a punch to the gut. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, like he'd just delivered some undeniable truth. Around the table, a few of the men exchanged glances, some amused, others indifferent. My chest burned, but I forced my hands to stay still, resting in my lap. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me react. My name is Chloe Rivers, and I've been a pilot for 25 years. I'm 43, divorced, and my life has revolved around the sky since I was a teenager. Flying has always been my escape, my freedom. But as a woman in aviation, freedom only gets you so far. No matter how many hours you log or how flawless your record is, people like Dave still look at you and see a liability. That day, when the promotion I'd poured my heart into went to someone who'd barely earned his wings, I knew something had to change. The first time I sat in a cockpit, my dad took me to see it. I was 9 years old, and he worked as a mechanic on small planes at the local airfield. "Chloe, you've got to see this," my dad said, his voice filled with pride as he opened the door to a shiny Cessna. I climbed into the pilot's seat, my hands trembling as they brushed over the controls. "Think you could fly one of these someday?" my dad asked, grinning as he leaned against the frame. "Are you kidding? I could fly it right now," I shot back, determined to sound confident even though I was awestruck. He laughed, ruffling my hair. "Big dreams, Chloe. Don't let anyone tell you they're too big." Those words stuck with me, especially when my mom tried to steer me towards something more practical. By the time I was 16, I'd saved every penny from babysitting and part-time jobs to pay for flying lessons. When I finally told my dad about my plan, he put down his coffee and looked at me, serious as ever. "So, you're really going to do this?" my dad asked. "Absolutely," I said, my heart pounding. "It won't be easy, Chloe," he said, leaning back in his chair. "They're going to make you work twice as hard because you're a girl. Are you ready for that?" "I'm ready," I said without hesitation. My dad nodded, the hint of a smile on his face. That was all the encouragement I needed. My mom wasn't as enthusiastic, but she didn't stop me either. "Just don't forget that flying isn't everything," she'd say, worried I was getting my hopes up too high. Years later, after the Air Force and decades of commercial flights, I thought I'd finally reached the point where I didn't have to prove myself anymore. So when the chief pilot position opened, I was sure it was mine. My record was spotless, my experience unmatched. But when Dave leaned back in his chair during the meeting and smirked, I should have known. "Passengers want to feel safe," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "And a woman in charge? That's a tough sell." Those words hit me like a slap. My dad's voice echoed in my mind. "They're going to make you work twice as hard." I'd worked 10 times as hard, and it still wasn't enough. That meeting was the final blow, but it wasn't the first time I'd been overlooked. It had been happening my entire career. When I was in the Air Force, my commanding officer used to give me the toughest assignments, saying it was to prove I belonged. But no matter how flawless my execution was, the promotions always went to someone else. When I transitioned to commercial aviation, it didn't get any better. The comments were subtler but no less stinging, little reminders that I wasn't what passengers or colleagues expected in a pilot. I tried to brush it off, telling myself that every flight I commanded was a chance to prove them wrong. And for a while, that was enough. My dad was my biggest cheerleader, calling me after every milestone. "Another glass ceiling smashed, Chloe," he'd say, his pride almost palpable. But when I told him about being passed over for chief pilot, his voice dropped. "That's not right, Chloe. You've given them everything. What are they giving you back?" "Nothing, Dad," I said quietly. "They're giving me nothing." "Then maybe it's time to stop playing by their rules," my dad said. His words stuck with me. For the first time, I started wondering if he was right. Maybe I'd spent too many years fighting to prove myself in a system that would never let me win. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my flight logbook. Over 20,000 hours in the air, countless long-haul flights, weathering everything from technical failures to passengers in full-blown panic. All of it. And what did I have to show for it? A ceiling I couldn't break through, and a career they refused to take seriously just because I wasn't a man. I called my dad. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, Chloe, what's up?" he asked, his voice calm and steady as always. "I'm done, Dad," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm quitting. I can't keep doing this. I've given them everything, and they just keep tossing me aside." There was a pause on the other end. Then he said, "Maybe it's about time. You've been playing their game for too long, Chloe. Maybe it's time to make your own rules." His words planted a seed. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said. By the end of the week, I knew what I had to do. If they weren't going to make space for women in leadership, then I would. That's how the idea for a women-only flight school was born. It felt crazy at first, a long shot, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I didn't just want to leave the airline. I wanted to change the industry. The first step was figuring out where to start. I had savings, but not enough to get a flight school off the ground. Planes, a hangar, instructors, it all added up fast. My mom, ever the pragmatist, called me the day after I told her about my plan. "Chloe, are you sure about this? Starting a business isn't like taking off in one of those planes. You can't just hit autopilot," she said, her voice tinged with concern. "I know, Mom," I said, pacing my living room, "but I can't keep banging my head against a wall that's never going to break. If I don't do this, who will?" She sighed. "You've always been stubborn. Just promise me you'll have a backup plan." "I promise," I said, though I knew there was no backup plan. This was it. My next call was to Laura Delgado, my former flight instructor and one of the few people in aviation who'd always had my back. When I told her my idea, she didn't hesitate. "Chloe, this is brilliant," she said. "The industry needs this. Let me help." With Laura on board, I felt like I finally had some traction. We spent hours sketching out ideas, looking for locations, and brainstorming how to recruit students. It wasn't glamorous, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was working towards something that mattered. From the start, I knew the school wasn't just about teaching women to fly. It was about leveling the playing field. I wanted to create a place where women could not only learn the technical skills, but also build the confidence to face an industry that would try to knock them down at every turn. My goal wasn't just to train pilots. I wanted to train leaders. Over coffee one morning, Laura and I hashed out our mission statement. "It has to be more than just aviation," I said, jotting notes in the margins of my planner. "We need to teach them how to navigate the system, to push back when someone says they're not enough." Laura nodded. "Exactly. We can bring in guest speakers, women who've broken barriers in aviation, engineering, anything related. Show them it's possible." "And scholarships," I added, my mind racing. "We'll make it accessible for women who can't afford traditional training programs." Laura leaned back, smiling. "You're not just building a school, Chloe. You're building a movement." Hearing her say that lit a fire in me. This wasn't just a business. It was a chance to change the narrative for every woman who'd ever been told she didn't belong. The next few months were a blur of planning, phone calls, and rejection emails. Every time I pitched the idea to potential investors or banks, I was met with skepticism. "A women-only flight school?" one bank manager said, raising an eyebrow. "It's a niche market. I'm not sure there's enough demand to make it sustainable." I started to worry that the school would fail before it even began. Then Laura came through with a lead. "Chloe," she said one evening as we sifted through paperwork at my kitchen table, "have you heard of Wings of Change? They're a nonprofit that funds aviation initiatives with a focus on diversity. I shook my head, but the idea gave me hope. Laura helped me pull together a detailed proposal, outlining everything from our mission to the practical details like tuition, projected costs, and how the school could make a real impact. A week after submitting it, I got a call from the director of Wings of Change. "Chloe, I've read your proposal," she said, her voice steady and professional. "And I have to say, this is exactly the kind of project we want to support. We're prepared to offer you a startup grant to cover your first year." I nearly dropped the phone. "You're serious?" I asked, my voice cracking with disbelief. "Dead serious," she replied. "Your vision is exactly what this industry needs." With their support, we were finally able to lease planes, rent a small hangar, and officially launch the Women's Aviation Academy. When the Women's Aviation Academy officially opened, I was equal parts excited and terrified. Laura and I had done everything we could to spread the word, but until that first day, we had no idea if anyone would actually show up. As I stood in the hangar that morning, nervously rearranging the chairs we'd set up for orientation, I heard a car pull up. The first to walk in was Sarah, a young aircraft mechanic with grease-stained hands and wide, eager eyes. "I've always wanted to be a pilot," she said, shaking my hand. "But every time I mentioned it, someone would laugh and say, 'Stick to fixing the planes, not flying them.'" Then came Janet, a retired nurse in her mid-50s. She looked around the hangar with a mix of awe and apprehension. "Flying's been my dream since I was a kid," she said, her voice soft. "But life got in the way, family, work, everything. When I saw your program, I thought, maybe it's not too late." By mid-morning, 5 women were seated in the hangar, each with a unique story but all sharing the same determination. I stood in front of them, trying to keep my emotions in check as I welcomed them to the academy. "You don't just belong here," I told them. "You're the reason this place exists." For the first time in months, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. Months passed, and word about the academy started to spread. At first, it was slow, mostly through social media and local aviation clubs, but then one of our students posted a video of her first solo flight on Instagram, and things took off. More applications started coming in, and soon our tiny classroom of 5 students grew into a bustling program with over 20 women enrolled. It wasn't long before Laura and I realized we couldn't handle everything ourselves. Between teaching classes, handling admin work, and keeping the planes in top shape, we were stretched too thin. "We need more instructors, Chloe," Laura said one evening as we went over the schedule. "We can't do this alone anymore." She was right. The next day we posted a job listing for flight instructors with a clear emphasis. We wanted people who believed in our mission. The responses were incredible. One applicant, Jasmine, was a former military pilot who had left the Air Force to start a family and wanted to return to aviation in a meaningful way. Another, Priya, was a commercial pilot who had grown disillusioned with the corporate side of flying and saw the academy as a chance to give back. By the end of the hiring process, we had a team of instructors who were just as passionate about the academy as we were. With their help, we could finally meet the growing demand while staying true to our vision. After a year of nonstop work, the academy was thriving. The airfield was no longer the quiet, run-down place we'd started with. It was alive with the buzz of engines, laughter, and the sound of women conquering the skies. But what really marked the turning point was the email I received one morning from a recruiter at Horizon Air, a mid-sized commercial airline. "Hi, Chloe," it read. "We've been hearing great things about the Women's Aviation Academy and wanted to know if you have any graduates ready for entry-level positions with us. We're looking for skilled pilots, and your program seems like the perfect place to start." I read the email twice, then called Laura. "Laura, you're not going to believe this. Horizon Air wants to recruit our students." She let out a cheer on the other end. "Chloe, this is it. This is what we've been working for. The industry is finally paying attention." Over the next few weeks, more inquiries trickled in. Small airlines, regional carriers, and even one from a major international airline asking about availability. Our students were in demand, and I couldn't have been prouder. The best part? Every time one of them landed a job, it felt like a victory not just for them, but for the mission we'd built together. Not long after the inquiries from airlines started rolling in, I got a phone call from a local high school. The principal introduced herself as Mrs. Turner and said, "Chloe, I've heard about what you're doing at the Women's Aviation Academy, and I think it's incredible. We're holding a career day next month, and I'd love for you to come speak to our students, especially the young women. I think they need to hear that this kind of career is possible." I hesitated for a moment. Speaking in front of a classroom full of teenagers wasn't exactly my comfort zone, but I knew how important it was to reach them. "Of course," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "I'd be happy to." The day of the lecture, I walked into the school gymnasium, which was packed with students buzzing with energy. Mrs. Turner introduced me as a trailblazer in aviation, and I felt a lump form in my throat. I took a deep breath and stepped up to the microphone. "When I was your age," I began, "I sat in a cockpit for the first time and knew I wanted to fly. But I also knew the world didn't always make it easy for girls like me to dream that big. That's why I'm here today, to tell you that no dream is too big and no goal is too far out of reach." The room grew quiet as I shared my journey, from my first flying lessons to starting the academy. When I opened the floor to questions, a girl in the front row raised her hand. "Do you think someone like me could be a pilot?" she asked, her voice uncertain. I smiled and said, "Not only do I think you can, I know you can. And when you're ready, you come find me at the academy, and we'll get you started." The look on her face made every challenge I'd faced along the way feel worth it. A few weeks after the lecture, I was at the academy, watching Lisa, one of our newer students, prepare for her first solo flight. Lisa was a single mom who had spent the last decade juggling work and raising her son. She'd told me once during a break between lessons that flying had always been her dream, but she'd never thought it was something she could actually pursue. "Life just gets in the way," she had said with a small, wistful smile. But here she was, strapping into the pilot's seat with the kind of determination that made me stop and watch. As she taxied down the runway, I held my breath. The moment her plane lifted off, a cheer went up from a small group of students watching from the edge of the hangar. I glanced at her son, who was standing next to me, his eyes wide with pride. "That's my mom," he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. When Lisa landed and stepped out of the cockpit, she looked overwhelmed but radiant. Her son ran to her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You're amazing, Mom," he said, beaming up at her. Lisa looked over at me, tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you, Chloe. You've changed my life." Driving home that night, I couldn't stop thinking about her words. For so many years, I had believed that success was measured by titles and promotions. But watching Lisa soar, both literally and figuratively, made me realize that true success was right here, in the lives I was helping to change. This was more than a career. It was a calling. A couple of years later, the Women's Aviation Academy was thriving in ways I could have only dreamed of. The old airfield that once felt empty and quiet was now a hub of activity. We had expanded to include 3 hangars, a fleet of 6 planes, and a steady stream of students from all walks of life. Some were young women fresh out of high school, eager to pursue a non-traditional path, while others were older, like Lisa, proving that it's never too late to chase a dream. Laura and I had even implemented new programs, scholarships for underrepresented women, partnerships with community colleges, and a mentorship initiative connecting students with experienced female pilots in the industry. Airlines were reaching out regularly, asking about our graduates, and our placement rate was climbing higher than we'd ever expected. One afternoon, while reviewing applications in my office, Laura walked in holding an envelope. "You're going to want to see this," she said, handing it to me with a grin. It was an invitation from the National Aviation Association, inviting me to speak at their annual industry gala as a keynote speaker. I stared at it for a moment, the weight of it sinking in. "They want me to talk?" I asked, half in disbelief. "They don't just want you to talk," Laura said. "They want you to share how you've reshaped the industry. Chloe, they're finally paying attention." As I read through the letter, I couldn't help but smile. The Academy wasn't just thriving, it was making waves, and the people who once dismissed me were now taking notice. The gala was held at a grand hotel ballroom downtown, with glittering chandeliers and a polished crowd of industry professionals. I arrived early, trying to take it all in. It felt surreal, walking into a room full of the same executives and decision-makers who had once ignored or dismissed me. But this time, I wasn't there as just another pilot. I was there as a keynote speaker, representing the Women's Aviation Academy and everything we'd built. Laura walked in beside me, beaming with pride. "You ready for this?" she asked, nudging my arm. "Ready as I'll ever be," I said, though my heart was racing. I scanned the crowd and saw familiar faces from my airline days, including Dave, standing near the back, his expression unreadable. Megan Carrington, who had always towed the company line, was nearby, chatting animatedly with a group of executives. The evening was moving along smoothly, with awards being handed out to trailblazers and innovators in aviation. I was seated at a table near the front with Laura and a few of our graduates who had come to support me. We were enjoying the speeches when one of the presenters took the stage and began talking about a special recognition award. This next award is given to someone who has not only excelled in aviation, but has also dedicated themselves to reshaping the future of our industry. This individual has created a path where none existed, empowering countless women to take to the skies. Tonight, we honor Chloe Rivers, founder of the Women's Aviation Academy, with the National Aviation Excellence Award. I froze, the words barely registering. Laura nudged me, her face glowing with pride. "Chloe, that's you. Get up there." As I made my way to the stage, the applause filled the room, but my heart was pounding for a different reason. Standing at the back of the crowd, arms crossed and visibly uncomfortable, was Dave. The man who had looked me in the eye years ago and told me passengers wouldn't feel safe with a woman in charge. He was here, and he was seeing this. I accepted the award with trembling hands and stepped up to the microphone. "Thank you," I began, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. I started the Women's Aviation Academy because I was tired of hearing the word no. "No, you're not what we're looking for. No, you don't fit the mold." Tonight, this award isn't just for me. It's for every woman who has ever heard no and decided to keep going anyway. The applause was deafening, but all I could see was Dave, his smirk replaced with an expression I couldn't quite read. For the first time, I felt the scales tip. And it wasn't just a personal victory. It was a vindication for everything I'd fought for. As the gala wound down and people began to filter out of the ballroom, I carried the award in my hands, still trying to process everything. The recognition, the applause, it felt like years of frustration and struggle had finally been validated. Laura had gone ahead to grab the car, leaving me to navigate the crowd alone. That's when I saw him. Dave. He was standing near the exit, a drink in his hand, and for a split second, I considered slipping out unnoticed. But then he looked up, and our eyes met. There was no turning back. "Chloe," he said, forcing a smile as I approached. "Quite the speech up there. Congratulations. On everything." "Thanks, Dave," I said, my tone calm but firm. "It's funny, isn't it? A few years ago, you didn't think a woman could handle the responsibility of leadership. And now, here I am." His smile faltered, and he looked away for a moment, clearly uncomfortable. "It wasn't personal, you know. It was just the way things worked back then. The way things worked? I repeated, shaking my head. Dave, it was the way you worked. But the world's changing now, and so is this industry. You're either part of the problem or part of the solution. I've chosen my side. What about you? He didn't have an answer. As I walked past him and out into the cool night air, I felt lighter than I had in years. The fight wasn't over, but tonight was proof that progress was possible, and I wasn't done making it happen. As I rode home that night, the award resting on my lap, I replayed the evening in my mind. The applause, the recognition, the look on Dave's face, it all felt surreal. But more than anything, it reinforced what I'd known for a while now. Starting the Women's Aviation Academy wasn't just the right decision. It was the best decision I'd ever made. When I got home, I placed the award on the mantel in my living room, right next to a framed photo of my dad. He had passed away 6 months ago, but his words still echoed in my mind. Don't let anyone tell you your dreams are too big. For years, I'd chased the approval of people who would never give it to me. But now, I wasn't chasing anyone. I was leading. As I sat on the couch, scrolling through messages from students, colleagues, and even strangers who had heard the news, I felt something I hadn't in years: peace. The fight wasn't over, and there were still barriers to break, but tonight was a victory. Not just for me, but for every woman who dared to dream big in a world that told her to stay small. And as I looked at the mantel one last time before heading to bed, I smiled. The sky wasn't just a limit anymore. It was a canvas, and we were rewriting what it meant to belong up there.
Hey there! Did you like the story? If you did, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot and makes sure you won't miss out on more great stories we share here. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.